Okay. So all viewpoints and voices are encouraged today. We hope this space and time will provoke deeper thinking about the ways in which technology and disability intersect and how we can use these insights to improve our practice and the experience of students. So in this, we are seeking to foster an environment in which respect, civility, diversity, opportunity, and inclusion are valued. And it is in this spirit that we are going to start our viewpoints session today. So with that, let me introduce the wonderful panelists that we have here with us. I'm going to spotlight you both. I hope that's okay. So it's a pleasure to have both Dr. Joanna Cannon, who is Professor of Educational Counselling, Psychology and Special Education, and Eric Chau, who's an occupational therapist with the Squire Society, who will be joining us today. Just going to spotlight us all. So Dr. Joanna Cannon is a professor in the Educational and Counselling Psychology and Special Education Department at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. She completed her PhD after teaching deaf and hard of hearing students in middle school as an itinerant and resource teacher for 9 years. She is also the parent of an adult who is deaf with disabilities. Dr. Cannon is the coordinator of the Education of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing online graduate program concentration in the special education area, where she teaches the language, literacy, and curriculum courses. And her areas of research include grammar and literacy acquisition for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. So welcome, Joanna. We're also joined by Eric Chau, who is an occupational therapist, certified work functional capacity evaluator as well. He received his Bachelor of Kinesiology and Master of Occupational Therapy degrees from UBC, and his current clinical work at the Squire Society focuses on addressing accessibility barriers encountered by individuals in the workplace and classroom through assistive technology and ergonomic solutions. So before we jump into our session, I'll talk a little bit about the format. We're going to ask each of our panelists to take about 5 to 10 minutes to share their viewpoints about the topic, so accessibility and technology, after which time we will open the floor for a general discussion and any questions that you may have pertaining to the topic. You are welcome and encouraged to post any comments or questions in the chat at any time. So with that, I'm going to begin and we'll start with Dr. Cannon. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it on to you, Joanna. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, it's got my earbuds in, so I was just checking. Well, thank you so much for having me, Gabrielle, and very nice to meet you, Eric. We're getting to meet online for the first time. So I'm so excited to have you here as well. And to everyone in the audience that has joined, happy to see you today. And Gabrielle already did a great introduction on me, so that's about what I was going to say about myself. So I won't do that. But just to give a little context, I have been teaching online for, I guess, about 15 years now, really. In my area, we're such a low incidence area of special education that we often train quite a lot of teachers, but they're in a diverse regions. And so in this program here at UBC to train teachers of the deaf, we used to have a hybrid program where we saw the students in person in the summer here on campus, and then we had them online during the year for courses. But we switched in 2020, not because of the pandemic, but we had already planned to do so. We switched to a fully online program. And that's what we now teach, and we're in our second cohort of fully online, which has gone very well. But we often hope to and have students who are deaf and hard of hearing themselves going through our program to become teachers of the deaf. And we do a lot of things we hope that are accessible for them online. And as Gabrielle mentioned, I'm a professor in the area of special education, so it goes beyond deafness into other areas and other disabilities that students might experience. And in my field, deafness is also often co-occurring with other disabilities for many people. So we see that piece as well. In the online format and in that sort of realm in which I work, We obviously do a lot around closed captioning, which is being modeled for you today on Zoom, and sign language interpreting. Some people communicate through ASL, American Sign Language, others through listening and spoken English in my field. And I guess the thing that I wanted to bring up today overall is just to think about not just in my area of deaf education, but all of special education, or thinking about providing courses that are accessible to everyone, is the principles of universal design for learning, which is what I always go back to for that foundation. And although some of those examples aren't necessarily, you might not think of applying them in an online format, I think that they all really do. And I guess that was the main focus of what I thought I would bring up at the beginning, for us to have sort of a foundation to work from. And those universal design for learning principles, if you don't know them, the first one really is to provide that multiple means of representation of material. And these should be things that we should be doing in all of our courses, I think, whether they're online or in person. But like I said, I think particularly for online, it helps with accessibility and clarity of the actual material, because we really want to think about how we're presenting it to the learners. How are we just customizing that display? I know in my field, making things visual is very important, right? So I want a lot of visual aspects on my course modules, whether those be videos that they're going to go access, or PowerPoint slides that I have graphics in. But really stopping and thinking very carefully about how I represent the content online in that organizational format. For our students at university level that might have disabilities, students that don't, because that's just good teaching practice for everyone, but also to model what they should be doing with their students in their classroom, right, when they become teachers themselves, because this is a teacher training issue. But many times online, if we're thinking about like the online accessibility piece, is alternating different types of text, font, and the images and the graphics to make sure they're accessible. And I think we're going to talk about some of that more today. The other thing that we like to see, particularly in my field, is the language models. So one of the things we're working with the Center for Accessibility for the Workplace Environment is getting more videos on my course content that takes the English print and puts it into a video of someone signing that in American Sign Language, so that that is accessible to people in their first language, not only accessible via print, so that we can recruit more students into our courses, like I said, who are deaf and hard of hearing themselves. We're going to be doing a faculty search in the next year for someone. We would love to have someone in the field join us as well. So those are different aspects that we would include. The other areas of UDL, I don't want to take up all my time, are to provide those multiple means of action and expression. And I think that's another area that I've been trying to think more generally about. How do I have students submit work to me within their courses? And again, thinking about, are we giving them different forms of expression? Are we allowing them to write, obviously in print-based format, but to do a video of themselves, to act something out in an artistic and expressive way, or to actually make a piece of art and have that represent their concepts within an assignment? So broadening our perspective about how the students express themselves across the courses. And this obviously intersects and overlaps with other areas of equity, diversity, inclusion, and other identities that might come up there, that we're considering how we're giving those types of choices. So I don't know if that's too general, because I realized too we want to be specific to online, but I kind of wanted to start out with more of a broader base of where I come from in starting to develop my courses from an accessibility viewpoint, which I hope is helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Joanna. It was really fascinating. I'll pass over to Eric now, if that's okay. So Eric, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Thanks so much for everyone for attending today. I've prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation just so I have some talking points on my end. Let me just share my screen. I see it's disabled right now.
Should be able to now, Eric.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay. So I'll just jump right in here, but okay. I'd just like to acknowledge that we're gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I'll give a brief background about Neil Squire Society and the work that we do. So we're a national nonprofit organization that empowers Canadians with disabilities through the use of assistive technologies, research development, and employment programs. I specifically work in the assistive technology and ergonomics department. So I work within a team of occupational therapists and assistive technology specialists, and we work with a variety of clients from various programs. It could be from insurance, it could be Work BC employment programs, private referrals. So I work with a lot of clients, and I'll sort of approach this from more of a clinical perspective. So the inductive approach is more so looking at all the various methods and approaches that we're putting together to look at what accessible learning means. I work with individuals on an individual basis, whether they come into our office, I go to workplaces or classrooms with them, look at all the different accessibility barriers, break them down, and then move towards the goal of what accessible learning looks like for that student or client. So we usually look at it at several dimensions for the individual. We look at the person, so what's their preferred mode of physical access to the course and the sensory input. So what information is being presented and how are they perceiving it? Then looking at the sensory processing. Once the information is provided to them, how are they interpreting it and understanding it? And then the sensory output, the feedback to the material being presented. So how are they responding and completing assignments and things like that? And then looking at the combination and the interactions between all of those. We consider their strengths and abilities, limitations and disabilities. So what are the actions that will allow them to have, to be able to access the course and also consistently access it without having too many challenges. So that's at the person level. Then we look at the environment level. So we're looking at the mode of delivery. So is it in-person lectures versus real-time online lectures, or is it asynchronous recorded lectures? Are lecture notes provided beforehand or afterwards, or sort of hybrid delivery of all these modes of delivery? We look at the physical environment. So how are they accessing the course in terms of in the classroom, or if they're accessing it online? Is it via video conferencing, or all the materials are presented on Canvas or other platforms where they can access it on their own time? Looking at the formats of lecture notes, readings, and then considering what equipment they have to access the course and the materials they need to review. The other portion we look at is also the occupation or the activity. So what is actually involved in the course. So attending classes, whether that's in person or video conferencing, how much they have to read, how much they have to write, studying, how much memorization is involved, what is needed for completing projects and examinations, the email communications or online posts, and then the frequencies of each task and the duration of each task really matters. As an occupational therapist, we're trained with various theories and models, but one of the more simplified models that are a bit more easily conceptualized is the person environment occupation model. So we're sort of looking at the bidirectional intersection between these 3 points that essentially dictates someone's ability to participate and engage in any kind of activity. And specifically here, it'd be more so towards academic endeavors. And then just based on clinical work that I've done, some of the more common barriers that I've seen is inaccessible PDFs. So if anything's being printed from a book, then it's generated as all one image versus having scannable text within. And then same thing with images. If there's embedded text within the image, sometimes it can be hard for students to look at that if they're trying to use a screen reader with it. Condensed text or small print. So with condensed text, just like long paragraphs of text, and some individuals may find it hard to either read or comprehend or process all that text in one. So having it broken up into smaller paragraphs and sentences or bullet points really help. With smaller text, some individuals, just in terms of low vision, may find that harder to read. There is built-in magnification features within Windows and Apple, but not everyone is aware of those features. So having larger print to start helps for some students. And then other difficulties are following along in class if it's all verbal, and then difficulty with note taking if there's a lot of information to take in, and for assignments, prolonged reading activities, or general just a lot of computer work. So those are just some common barriers. Some of the things, this is not an all-inclusive list. These are just a few examples of the things that we explore to help out with some of the barriers and challenges. So we sort of look at it hardware and software. So the hardware is more any sort of physical equipment that can help. So for people with low vision, we have handheld digital magnifiers or stationary larger magnifiers to enlarge print for clients to read. We have for concussion or light sensitivity, if the light coming from the screen is impacting the students, there are blue light filter glasses, lenses. There's different settings we can change on the monitors and and within Windows, or have e-readers that are that have paper-like displays that don't project the same amount of backlighting. And there's other devices like the Live Scribe Smart Pen. So this one is a smart pen where you can write brief notes, and it's also acts as an audio recorder that you can rewind and be able to retain all that information, because even anyone, it's hard to write word for word about what the instructor says. In terms of software, there's various software and built-in features. For low vision, we have Zoom text software that has multiple enlargement features or contrast. We have other software that has optical character recognition to help with inaccessible PDF reading. And then there's a variety of accessibility features within Windows and Apple operating systems. We look at enabling closed captioning and transcription for those who are hard of hearing, or just beyond that, just need their preferred mode is to read and allow them to have information presented to them that is not in real time in the example of transcription, where it provides them that time to process the information on their own time. Alternative typing access and mouse access. We have dictation. So for individuals who find it a bit harder to type and interact with the computer with a keyboard, there's using your voice to dictate text. And then there's Dragon software that also allows for controlling your computer using voice controls software. That's a lot of the assistive technology side, but we also consider the ergonomic equipment side. The course itself can have a lot of built-in accessibility concepts that cater to universal design. But if the student themselves don't have the right equipment, then that presents as a barrier. So then we also look at making sure they have a good seating surface, a desk, and then monitors, their computer or laptop has the right compatibility and specifications to match what they're doing. Then we look at any alternative keyboards, mice, microphones, headsets, and lighting if that affects them, if they have concussion or any light sensitivity. The other element we consider is also accommodations and resources. So different schools have different centers, but just coordinating with centers for accessibilities, the instructors, the student advising centers to look at what other accommodations can be put in place to support the students. There are also resources out in the community that can be of help. Assistive Technology BC, they're an organization that provides support to post-secondary students who meet the criteria. The Niels Squire Society delivers the Work BC Assistive Technology Services Program. This program is working with individuals with disabilities who are connected to an employment center, and oftentimes those clients enroll in school courses or programs that are leading to employment. So we provide the assistive technology and ergonomic support services. There's private service providers that provide assistive technology assessment and support. And then there's also commercial assistive technology vendors. Canadian Assistive Technology is an example of one organization where they specialize in looking at all the alternative access for online means. Just takeaways from the things I mentioned is when we're looking at accessibility from a clinical perspective, we look at the person level factors, environment level factors, and occupational level factors, and the bidirectional interactions. We identify what the barriers are to accessible learning, and then look at assistive technology, hardware, software, and ergonomic equipment to overcome those barriers. And we also look at the accommodations and resources and support that are available in the community. So that's just an overview of the clinical side from what we usually look at on a day-to-day basis to make any activity accessible for the people we work with.
Thank you so much, Eric. It was really, really wonderful to see all of the different strategies that you are using at the Niels Squire Society to provide accessible options for students and workers. So what I will do now is I'm going to stop recording the sort of presentation component of our session.